haven't been in Washington so long that I've been infected by that cynicism. The job is not worth doing for what they pay. It's not worth doing for the grief, but it is worth doing for the principle.
Powerful stuff. Turns out total BS, but powerful. Now, ProPublica is back with another damning report on Justice Clarence Thomas and his shady relationship with wealthy donors. Now, this time their reporting revealed that despite making 4 to 5 times more money than an average American worker or household, Thomas complained about how much he was getting paid as a United States Supreme Court justice, and he did so to a Republican. And Republicans were apparently terrified that if he didn't get a pay raise as a Supreme Court justice, he might resign from his position. Now, of course, he didn't. But I think that the details of this story show you the alternate reality that some people in our government live in, including members of the Supreme Court. Now, here's what happened. In January of 2000, according to ProPublica, Clarence Thomas was at a 5-star beach resort in Sea Island, Georgia. Really living the tough life at a 5-star beach resort. While he was there, he actually gave an off-the-record speech at a conservative conference. Now, at the time, he was actually hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and he was frustrated with his money problems. For example, when Thomas and his wife Ginny bought the home for $522,000 a year after he joined the court, remember this is the year 2000, they borrowed all but $8,000, less than 2% of the purchase price, property records show. Now keep in mind, most Americans can't even dream of getting a mortgage unless they have at least 20% down for their homes. Just wanna give you that juxtaposition because I think it's relevant here. Now, throughout the first decade of his tenure, the couple regularly borrowed more money, including $100,000 in credit on their house, and they borrowed against their house, and a consumer loan of up to $50,000. In 1999, the justice had borrowed, get a load of this, $267,000 from a friend to buy a high-end RV. Wow, he had money problems? Weird. Okay, let me give you more, okay? On his flight from home, or on his flight on the way home from this conference, he was seated next to a Republican congressman at the time. His name was Cliff Stearns, who left their conversation concerned that Thomas might resign over his financial troubles. Congress should give Supreme Court justice a pay raise, or justices a pay raise, Thomas told him. If lawmakers didn't act, 1 or more justices will leave soon, maybe in the next year. Worried, Stearns wrote a letter to Thomas after the flight promising to look into a bill to raise the salaries of members of the Supreme Court. As we agreed, it is worth a lot to Americans to have the Constitution properly interpreted, Stearns wrote. We must have the proper incentives here too. Now, at the time, this is the year 2000, Clarence Thomas's salary in the Supreme Court was $173,600. In today's money, that's a $300,000 salary. He was complaining about his money problems and had the audacity to do so after spending more than $250,000 on a freaking RV. Now, he never ended up getting that massive pay raise that he wanted, but he did find other ways to make money, and we're gonna get to that in just a moment.
Yeah.
But ordinary Americans, if they make one mistake, they do one thing that's even remotely irresponsible with their money, all hell breaks loose, okay? Pylons, you're irresponsible with money, you did this to yourself. This guy bought how much was it again, Cenk?
$267,000.
$267,000 RV. And then he whines. After vacationing at a 5-star resort, he whines about his money problems. Okay.
Yeah, there's 2 parts of the story. One is his whining, and apparently he's deeply irresponsible with money. I mean, if you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, who the hell buys a $267,000 RV, which is a massive, massive luxury? And think about it, put aside the RV, imagine that it was a Lamborghini that cost $267,000. Can you imagine buying a Lamborghini and go, I got money problems? Well, maybe you shouldn't have bought the Lamborghini, right? And I don't know if a Lambo is more or less than that RV.
Same, no idea.
I mean, and remember that's from back then. So that amount now would be around $400,000 at least, okay? So it's an insane amount to spend, okay. But the second part of the story is why he's doing it. And he was smart to do it. He basically says to Republicans and conservatives, now if you'd like me to stay around and keep voting for you guys to get richer and more powerful, etc., I really could use some more cash, wink. And oh, I wish I had a higher salary, wink. Well, as you're about to find out, they got him a lot more cash, but they didn't do it through his salary.
Now, let's get to the details on how he found a way to live that luxury lifestyle that he so desperately wanted. So in the years that followed that conversation that he had with Stearns, Thomas accepted a stream of gifts from wealthy friends and acquaintances, including vehicle batteries, private school tuition that would have cost roughly $100,000. He ended up being the guardian of his grandchild. He ended up raising his grandchild. Couldn't send the grandchild to a regular school, a public school. You have to send them to a super ritzy private school that costs $100,000.
Of course, I mean, they can't be in there with the riffraff. Okay, the Thomas have to live a good life. I think it was a grandnephew.
Oh, grandnephew, my bad, okay. And to be fair, ProPublica also reports that precisely what led to many people to offer Thomas money and other gifts remains an open question. There's no evidence the justice ever raised the specter of resigning with Crow, meaning Harlan Crow, one of the wealthy donors here, or other wealthy benefactors. Okay, so we don't know if he had a similar conversation with these wealthy donors, a conversation similar to that of the one that we just described with former Congressman Stearns. However, sources make it clear that Thomas's comments in the year 2000 sent Republicans in DC into somewhat of a panic that their conservative ally might resign. And indeed, during this second decade of the court, Thomas's financial situation did improve significantly. In 2003, for instance, he received the first payments of a $1.5 million advance for his memoir, a record-breaking sum for justices at the time. Ginny Thomas, who had been a congressional staffer, was by then working at the Heritage Foundation and was paid a salary in the low six figures. That was the other thing that he was whining about, apparently. Other justices had spouses who worked as attorneys, made a lot of money, but his wife Ginny wasn't making a lot of money. And he was also bitter about the fact that he spent his career working in government, whereas the other justices had previous careers in the private sector and made a lot of money doing that. So this entire time he's sitting there and he's comparing himself to other justices and their financial situation and feeling incredibly bitter about it, while spending his money irresponsibly and pretending like he's some sort of victim who isn't getting paid enough in salary, which by the way is funded by who? Who funds that salary? Us, the United States taxpayers. You want to be in government? Then at least understand what that entails. You're not gonna be wealthy working for government. But well, I mean, you can be if you engage in insider trading as members of Congress do, or if you're taking all sorts of, sweet treats from wealthy donors and not reporting it as Clarence Thomas was doing.
Yeah, so hey, whatever happened with the $267,000 he couldn't afford for that RV but spent anyway? Well, it was, he got the money from a friend, also happens to be a conservative who cares a lot about these Supreme Court issues and befriended Clarence Thomas later in life. What a surprise, he had another friend like that. And guess what? Many years later, that guy just forgave the loan. So what is that? That's just a bribe. That's a $267,000 bribe to buy him this luxury RV that he never had to pay back. Did you notice earlier in the story when Anna said that he bought a house? By the way, that was a 5-acre property in Virginia, okay? But he's, again, totally irresponsible with his spending. But I guess he knew, oh no, the bribes are gonna come later. I'll just ask for it in one of these 5-star resorts and then they'll just send it in to me. He put down only 2%. Who can buy a house by only putting down 2%? That's impossible. Unless your rich new friends, after you become a Supreme Court justice, finance the rest of the house. Let alone the scam about 2 things that give money. By the way, now he says, no, I don't have any money problems anymore. Yeah, really? So the one that Anna mentioned to you guys was Ginny Thomas, his wife. So she was not a lawyer, she does not have any expertise, is not in banking or anything like that, and wasn't even working. So guess what? A conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, hired her. So now, before her salary was not that high, now her salary is very high. Oh, that's another way of funneling money through the right-wing donors to Clarence Thomas's pocket. Very literally, no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Apparently she's doing a lot of thinking at that think tank and really contributing. And then finally, the $1.5 million he got for his book. So Regnery Publishing does all the conservative books. And so the way that works is, if you need to funnel money to a right-winger, they write a book and then they get a book advance. Supreme Court justices, they didn't get anywhere near $1.5 million back when he got it. It was an unprecedented deal. But you see, the trick is, Regnery doesn't care about making its money back. So, because the whole point is to get my speculation, okay? What we know is they gave him $1.5 million that no Supreme Court justice had come close to getting. Then whether he actually sells the books or not is a different question. And by the way, later in life, he is not reporting his royalties. God knows how much he's getting in royalties. And guess who bought tons and tons of Clarence Thomas books? Yeah, the public, probably zero, okay? But the guy who bought a lot of those books, Leonard Leo, bought them in mass book sales. Leonard Leo is the guy who is picking the Supreme Court justices, the guy with that is now managing now about over $1 billion, and who Republican presidents go to and say, who should we pick? So this is a giant scheme to funnel money to Clarence Thomas and whichever Supreme Court justice they like. You need money? No problem. We'll get it through the books and the houses and the loans that are forgiven and the luxury vacations and everything else in between, while you still cry about how you're the victim and you don't have enough money. Please.